All right, evolving web, evolve Drupal. Woo! The next sessions are getting ready to begin, so if you are grabbing coffee, get caffeinated. If you want to find a seat. And if you want to continue to chit-chat, take it to a little bit of a quieter area. All right, so my name's on the slide, but Suzanne's going to be a part of this as well. We're going to do this as a small amount of presentation and then more like a conversation. And that should include all of you in sort of questions and answers and dialogue. So you can obviously try to quiz us. We're also, let me say, as we get into it, we're open to the less of a question, more of a comment type of input as part of this, because I think we all want to like talk about our experience here. But I'm going to set the table with just a little bit of context. I think coming out of giving a talk in the technical track about being agile and iterative, and then sitting and watching that great presentation on kind of the opposite, right? When do you need to go waterfall and why? And connecting these two things, it actually feeds nicely into the slides that I have to tee up this conversation. So without further ado, my name is Josh. If you don't know me, I've been in the Drupal ecosystem for over 20 years. And I founded a company with some friends 14 years ago called Pantheon. We're a website operations platform that helps people use Drupal in an evolving and agile way. We're used by mostly web professionals. Tens of thousands of teams use our product every day. They run hundreds of thousands of websites. Those hundreds of thousands of websites reach over 1 billion unique visitors a month. And we're really happy to be here and in the room. It's really exciting to be a part of events like these. I'm currently our Chief Strategy Officer, which means I have time to come out of the office and do things like this, but for the first decade or so, I was the head of the product organization. So if you want to buttonhole me about your favorite Pantheon bug later, I'm here for it. So here's the thing. We did this survey. It was down 2 years ago, but I don't think things have changed overnight, because this is not a new problem. We surveyed about 450 corporate marketing professionals about their experience running web. And one of the things we found in this survey, there's a bunch of great findings in the survey actually, but one of the ones that stood out was 80% of these people reported making changes to their website, which in the way the question was worded, included changes to content, could take a week, if not a month, to complete. That's not great. The reality of how people need to use the web, like the web is the owned digital property of every organization. It is the ego projection of your organization, your company, your business, your mission into the internet. It's the place that is yours. Everywhere else you show up on social media, very important. That's someone else's territory. So being able to leverage the web effectively means being able to move much more real time than this. Being able to adopt this notion of composing experiences and evolving what you present and how you operate requires a certain amount of velocity. And everything else in this diagram moves pretty fast, right? Like Google allows you to real-time optimize all of your paid digital advertising 24/7, 365. Those things are happening second by second. Social media never sleeps. Email campaigns can be scheduled and can go out automatically and updated all the time. And very often, there's a piece that's at the center of all of this, Drupal, the website, but Drupal in particular, and it's not moving at the same pace. It's not set up to move at the same pace. And this is not a unique problem to Drupal at all. Like all web technology has this potential pitfall, where the website is just on a different type of cadence than the rest of everything happening in digital marketing. And as a result, what ends up happening, and many of us who've been in this business for a while, we all know it when we see it, is all these things start to work around the website. You get people who are finding ways to just get user flows that don't have to actually touch the website, because gosh, it's just a big morass that things run into. Or you're trying to get more functionality on the website, and you're adding tags upon tags upon tags, and so there's like an actually existing website in there with like multiple overlay things slapped onto it to try to get the right user experience or a better user experience into place, and it's often a worse user experience or a very brittle one. Some of this is because of technology and vendors. A lot of it, I want to be candid. In the last talk, talking about how you manage your project and how to set up stakeholder expectations and get the right mindset so that you can work in an agile and meaningfully evolutionary way is super important. Because it doesn't really matter what technology you have. If you get stuck on a death march, it's not going to end well. But the way that our industry works has not really helped. There's a model out there which is like, for all sorts of business reasons, wants to kind of sell you an all-in-one holistic technology stack that solves all the problems, costs all the money, and takes all the time to implement. And if you can do that, it's good business. But the reality is the market is speaking that there's another way to do things, which is actually to say, we want to be a little bit more flexible about what we're doing with all these technologies that power all these marketing experiences. We want to actually pick the best tool for the job in many cases. And you can totally go overboard with this. Like you see this all the time where people have way too many technologies, or they bought stuff and they're not even using it, or there's it's too much of a hodgepodge. But like the happy medium here is you're able to pick a few key pieces that you're going to stick with long term, like your CMS, your CRM, maybe a couple of other things, and you implement those in a way that can evolve, that can continue to embrace what's going on in the market, what's going on in your business, so that you're not stuck with what you initially launched with necessarily. And that's what we think of as like the composable stack, right? The digital experience platform is kind of the old way of thinking about things. And the truth is, if you press the analysts who came up with this terminology to really define what it is, they'll get a little bit defensive and flustered, because you just read the words on this. It's like an architectural foundation and modular services for developers and practitioners to create, orchestrate, and optimize digital journeys at scale to drive loyalty and new commerce outcomes across owned and third-party channels. That's like everything. So like you're not, and the point here is that it's a very difficult thing to actually buy everything. But that's kind of what the vendors have traditionally put into the market. And it hasn't worked out well. Because the market has spoken in the reality of what's occurred. Like I don't think that analysts are ill-willed or trying to do anything untoward. I also don't think they're not smart. They're very smart. But they made a prediction a few years back that all of the stuff that we think of as digital experience would follow the pattern of other software. It would be like ERP or CRM, these big business systems that eventually did consolidate on 3 vendors like Oracle, Microsoft, and SAP. Right? And like you saw that movie happen before. That's an industry trend. You could reasonably predict that trend would occur again. But I think the reason that didn't happen was because digital experience, such as it is, naturally resists the commodification that happens when it gets consolidated onto like a couple big, huge monolithic vendors. The truth is, if your digital experience, so actually, sorry, let me take a step back. You don't really want to run a novel CRM process. Like, you don't want to have your sales process be something you invented. You're keeping track of your customers and managing the data and the processes around them from business to business to business is something that like, there's just best practices for how it should work within a certain degree of flexibility. Everyone doing it the same, having the UI that you will use will look the same, etc. That's actually a benefit. But when you think about the digital experience that you're putting into the market, to the public, to your customers, to your fans, to your followers, to your prospects, if you look the same as everyone else, that's bad. Because you're not differentiating. You're surrendering your competitive advantage. You're not positioning yourself as different and innovative. And so what actually happened was the Martech 150 became the Martech 10,000, because what people want to do with delivering engaging audiences on the internet with the public is just fractally evolving and always kind of going in that direction. It's not commodifying in the way that they predicted. And as a result, it's just not working very well. Like, people are not happy, by and large, with digital experience platforms. They don't, they're not being abandoned overnight because they were really expensive and they took a long time to implement, and so there's a lot of decision making that has to happen with what to do next. But people don't recommend them to others in large numbers compared to more agile technologies. So you can see that there's a trend in industry that's going to occur as people realize that buying into kind of a monolithic approach is probably not the best thing. It's not effective at achieving organizational goals. And at the end of the day, all-in-one solutions they're just challenging, right? You can't buy an EXP because you can't buy everything, and nor should you. And where I want to get into the conversation with Suzanne and all of you is thinking about how Drupal is actually kind of uniquely suited to meet this moment. Open source technology has an incredible value in this context because of its malleability, because of the fact that you can integrate anything you need and actually craft the way things function. And there's a big universe of talented people you can tap into, and a big universe of contributed technology that you can just pick up and leverage. And so the cost of being able to do something that is just what you need and can evolve as you go is actually fairly achievable, especially when you think about it versus the cost of trying to buy everything and implement it all in a giant waterfall project that ends up on the death march. So this is what we talk about when we talk about WebOps at Pantheon. It's the ability to put yourself into a position to not just solve the first problem of marketers that need to publish content quickly, but to put yourself in a position where the technology that really drives the user experience is something that you can fully own and use to drive innovation. So you're from that relaunch your website and stop to the continuous evolution of the CMS functionality itself, right? Like being able to say, hey, look, we got a lot of feedback from our content editors that this workflow is a little challenging or they're making a lot of mistakes. Like, let's fix that. Let's make them more productive. Let's get the people that are working in marketing and content to shift right into doing more things in production. And let's get the developers, shift right into production. And get the developers and the designers to shift left into working on things that are reusable and functional, that democratize this within their organizations. So this is kind of the high level thing, and then what I want to get into in conversation is how this fits into the current state and the future state of the Martech ecosystem, how organizations are using this really well today, and what can we learn as we try to practice this craft better and better going forward. So with that, I'm going to stop the presentation and start the conversation.
So before I get into some questions and some thoughts I had, when we were just all having coffee before this, somebody saw the title up on the screen and they said, well, I'm going to come to this presentation and I don't even know what WebOps is. So maybe start with just that question for folks who just want to take a step back and say, how can WebOps help me in my organization? But how would you define WebOps, just high level?
That's a great question. So the simplest definition of WebOps is the application of proven. Oh, you want to?
Give him that mic, you can stand up.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the application of proven practices from DevOps to the particular context of the web, which has some specific technical challenges, and also is broad enough to include other persona stakeholders, particularly people in design and in marketing. So WebOps is the ability to continually release and improve not just the content on the website, but the look, feel, and functionality of the website itself. and it's the ability to get away from these kind of all-in-one monolithic solutions and embrace a sort of a more, your website is software versus your website is a series of static assets mindset at a high level. And it involves like basically getting people to collaborate on all that stuff on a continuous basis.
Thanks. I think that's helpful, but set a bit of context. In terms of the talking about building your own platform and all this choice that you're talking about, of course, this is one of the big benefits of Drupal is it's an open platform. But when we're talking about messaging around Drupal and telling marketers, oh, you get all these choices and there's this many thousands of modules available, I think sometimes people just get this paralysis because there's so many options. Is there a benefit to telling people, here's a recommended stack, or here are marketing technologies that maybe work better with Drupal or with a WebOps setup?
Yes. So I really liked the way the previous presentation and Perry mentioned around the Royal Ontario Museum and their process, and like own your subject matter expertise. Because what you're, I explain it like this. There's potentially two extremes, both of which are bad, right? There's the extreme of one monolithic solution and you're stuck with it and you get what you get and don't get upset. And then there's the other extreme of there are a million decisions to make and 7,000 different technologies involved and it's just chaos. What our job is to help people find the middle path. Which involves an opinionated approach to a lot of things, but opinions that can be flexible when necessary. When you discover something about the use case or the business or the challenge that actually says, oh, well, my usual go-to for this might not be the right one. But you don't want to go to people and say, okay, how do you want to manage your content? Because most people don't think that way. You have to like talk to them about how they want to run their business or their organization or achieve their mission, and then bring them a proposal that says, I think we should work this way. And for professionals, my experience has often been that if you work with a certain type of customer or within a certain industry or solve a certain type of problem, you're sort of narrowing your area of expertise in even more broadly from just like web. Web is very broad. To Drupal, Drupal's still very broad. It's like Drupal for museums. Now that's an area of expertise. And if you really become an expert in that, the reality is you might know more than the average client does about what they need. And so you can bring that expertise to bear. But you do it in such a way that's not rigid, right? The whole approach of allowing for composability, allowing for flexibility, also helps to de-risk some of the decisions that you'll make in the process, right? So that, guess what? We thought it was this, we got the website live, it turns out that didn't work so well, okay, let's fix it. Versus, we have to make every decision perfectly in this specification process because we're gonna live with what we get for the next 4 years. Right? It's changing that mindset. And Drupal can be its own worst enemy with all the choices to make. That's true, right? But it can also be such a game changer in terms of what it lets you do from a evolutionary perspective and taking that approach.
Yeah, we have a lot of higher ed clients that use Slate, for example. Does anyone here use this as CRM? But there's different ways to integrate with it. So you can just embed a form like easy peasy, done in an hour or two in an afternoon, but maybe you want to customize more the look of that form, so that takes a bit of extra effort, or maybe you want a tighter integration so you can see what's available there. So I see how, building that expertise that's a bit more domain specific helps narrow those choices, and maybe also helps us do better marketing and training for people onboarding and joining the project.
Yeah. I think, again, coming from 20 years of being in the Drupal ecosystem, it's really easy to think Drupal, 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 Drupal. I still have that song stuck in my head. But the reality is that's not what the people who are using this stuff are thinking, right? And we shouldn't try to force them to think that way. We need to think about their experience and their goals and use their language as much as possible as we describe this. And I think when you do that, what you can see is like Drupal is kind of this like, it's the catalyst. It's like the straw that stirs the drink that gets them working in a new way. Because when the web is integrated with the rest of the Martech stack and it's all humming, people are much happier. They're able to do more effective work, and the business outcomes are much better. And so like, talk about that and focus on that, and like Drupal is a means to an end, so to speak.
Okay, I have a question about Drupal Starshot that's coming up. Who here has heard of Drupal Starshot? Yeah, oh, awesome, lots of people. So this is this initiative. I'm going to try to explain it in like one sentence. So it's a way to create a package for Drupal that's easier for people to get started with. So if I just want to get an event site up and running tomorrow, that out of the box I can launch something and get the solution I need. And it leverages a new or relatively new thing in Drupal called recipes. And recipes are kind of like features 2.0, like a way to package up one type of thing you want in Drupal, like a lot of websites need a blog, or they need an events calendar. So let's package that together as a recipe and enable that. And I'm wondering how, with Starshot and trying to enable the individual builder persona, if there's WebOps tooling that we can give those folks also to help enable them to, like, I'm going to go and pick from a library of recipes or something like that.
Yeah, I think the way that, so I'll say like, there's WebOps, the idea, the concept, like, you know, and that's very broad. It's kind of like a cultural thing of let's get these people to come together and collaborate and agree that we want to work continuously. And then there's what I do at Pantheon specifically, which is like a set of tools that enable the adoption of WebOps in larger organizations or in higher stakes contexts. So there's a version of this concept of recipes or features or what have you that, like, for the individual site builder working with a small team on like a smaller website, and that like the idea that they could just pick something from a project list and click it and have it be live immediately is like awesome. And I think that can actually help people do, you know, embrace that WebOps mindset at the small scale. At the larger scale, it's actually kind of risky to imagine like a single person in the production website clicking a button in a project tracker and having a bunch of new functionality go live immediately. Like, what you would want is to be able to like try and mess around with that in a safe, sandboxed environment, talk to people about how it's working, review it with them, and then if it looks good, deploy it in a really controlled way. And Drupal is actually super awesome at this because it can take a lot of things that are traditionally involve a lot of button clicking in the admin UI and package them up into code. So it's like configuration as code, so you can manage the release of a bunch of configuration changes. And that's part of like the workflow that we and others support when it comes to managing Drupal in a WebOps context. So I think it's really exciting to have this functionality coming into Drupal for individual site builders, and because of the way Drupal's architected, it should be something that more, you know, complex organizations can actually embrace with gusto.
Okay, right, so maybe like Evolve Drupal can decide, oh, tomorrow we're going to launch a podcast, let's download the podcast recipe and get it going. But the ROM is going to have to take a bit more time to decide, you know, what is this podcast going to be, and let's make sure it goes through the proper channels.
Yeah,
so have this kind of governance.
Yeah, and I think there's a world where like the governance is necessary, like it's mandated. But I also like we're trying to democratize this stuff and like make it like less, like it's never going to be, you know, but make it less expensive and more accessible. Because I think even if you're evolving Evolve Drupal, the event, or Evolving Web, you know, for your agency thing, like kind of want to like mess around with that functionality before it's publicly available. Like that should be easy, and it's not too hard now, but it's hard enough that a lot of people still do kind of cowboy code it in production, and you know that's often less than ideal, because if it goes wrong, it turns into a fire drill.
And another thing I think about. As a previous career, I was a front-end developer. That was kind of my last technical job before now I'm like you, a bit more of a strategic role. And I was, learning React and getting into building sites with Gatsby, and I found that there was a tremendous amount of tooling required to get one of these decoupled Drupal sites up and running. And I'm wondering where things are at now with decoupled, or what your thinking is around these sites that maybe when you showed that first slide of how much friction there can be in terms of publishing changes. Do decoupled websites help or hurt, and how can we make them easier to use?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the move towards, so I actually think my opinion is the Drupal-centric version of observing this trend as it's about headless Drupal is actually a little bit backwards. I think that this trend is really being driven by user experience, end user experience, and the reality that these web windows are now fully fledged application environments, and the tools that are used to deliver user experience in that context have been on have just been evolving and innovating massively. So the expectation now is that when you tap a link from your phone, it might take you to a website, but ideally you don't think about it being a website because the experience on the other side of that tap is just as good as whatever native app you were in when you were browsing your feed or whatever. And that involves like a modern front-end development tool chain. Anything is possible, but really, like if you're not working with a modern front-end development tool chain, it's very hard to hit that goal. And so there are a lot, and then that leads into a lot of cases where it can get complicated to combine the Drupal development tool chain with the modern front-end development tool chain. And so sometimes people get frustrated enough by that they're like, let's decouple this. Let's just let the front-end devs do the front-end dev thing and don't bother them with all the Drupal overhead, which is not a bad thing, but it introduces this level of complexity to projects. And certainly, there's different flavors of this that play into that difficulty managing content. I mean, the first one is actually quite obviously where they don't think about a CMS at all, right? I've talked to so many people, they build a website and they build it as a static website, and it looks so good and it's so fast and it's super scalable and it's wonderful, and they try to turn it over to the client, and the client's like, we want to make a content change, and they say, well, here's your GitHub login, and the client's like, did you just tell me to go fuck myself? Because it doesn't work for them. They're not going to edit a markdown file. But the problem is that if you do it right, you can set up a headless Drupal that will let them seamlessly manage their content. But it's complicated. It's complicated because you've separated these two systems and giving people the confidence that they know what change. Like even in a monolithic Drupal, if it's not really thoughtfully implemented, you can end up in a world where you're like nervous to hit publish because you're not exactly sure what's going to happen. That risk goes up a lot in the context of a decoupled environment. So I think the trend is going to continue, but it's not going to be super fast until a lot of that ambiguity and complexity gets resolved either by improvements in open source, improvements in platform providers, and so forth.
Yeah, I also know people who are scared to hit the preview button in Drupal because they don't know what's going to happen. So we haven't fully solved that problem yet. In the first presentation I gave this morning, there were lots of questions about AI, but I want to ask it maybe in terms of when we talk about enabling marketers, publishing content, all the tooling we can build into a site. Are there any AI tools that can help us with that kind of like content quality or anything that we can do so that editors are less responsible for all the things like SEO value, accessibility, this compliance of their content? Can AI help us with this, or do you have any thoughts on content monitoring in general?
Well, so I think there's two sort of different questions in there. One is the use of like more general machine learning type stuff, which absolutely can help with like the sort of outside-in content governance, right? There are tools that exist now that can really help, especially in a situation where you're not starting a brand new website. It's not a totally greenfield project. It has like legacy. You know, a lot of these things have legacy that goes back for 20, 25 years. And there's a lot of content, like you're talking about doing this big content audit. Like there's a huge human project. I don't think AI is going to make content auditing go away, but it can potentially speed it up. Because there are tools now where you can let an AI model crawl your website, and it will give you its best guess as to what all the pages are about and who might be interested in them, and so on and so forth. And similarly, there's other tools that have used the same stuff to the effect of also trying to spot, you know, quality issues, whether that's accessibility, SEO, you know, performance, misspellings, broken links. Like all those things are like very human assistive, right? That's kind of where the real value of AI is. Today, it's not replacing people; it's making people more powerful. Because on the flip side, especially as people have been excited, and it is kind of exciting and cool about all the things with generative AI that's come up. What's become abundantly clear is that you can't just like let that go on its own, like because people have tried it and it's gone very bad and it's had disastrous results, like business shuttering results for some organizations that try to just automate content production. So I think it's about using it tastefully, figuring out what the right way to, like, you know, my co-founder and CTO, David Strauss, says that the key to thinking about this is AI doesn't mean artificial intelligence, it means artificial interns. Like, what would you do if you had 1,000 interns that you could put on any project and they worked around the clock? Right? There's lots of stuff you can do with that. There's also lots of stuff you cannot do with that. Because the human in the loop for this stuff is so important. Yeah, that's how I think about it, because his language infected my brain 6 months ago and I can't unthink it.
Yeah, I love the idea of using AI to get a reflection back of, okay, AI, tell me what all the content on my website is about, because sometimes you just need that third-party perspective to tell you, like, what is all that content that you're putting out there? Did you know you have all this stuff that hasn't been updated in 10 years? And just kind of getting that raw feedback sounds like very good input to any kind of redesign project. Well, I'd love to open it up to some questions from the room as well. Anyone have questions here?
Actually, it's about the same point of intelligent artificial intern. Do you don't think it's like good to make a proposition of strategy, a point? Because sometimes AI is like you can say, oh, which best I don't know option to develop this, or which best way to develop this, or to I think it's in strategic point he have kind of. And he proposed many like a path. So you don't think this?
So I think so the question is, you know, using AI in kind of a strategically important context. Let me make sure if I get the question right. And having AI help you develop proposals that then you can make a decision on. And I think that is, yes, and very much kind of like what Suzanne was just saying. Like, give me a perspective, like, or honestly, like, where does this really have I seen people get real value out of this? Like, I enjoy writing. The blank page is very easy for me to work with, but that's not like a lot of people don't. And like a poorly written first draft that you get from ChatGPT or something gets you rolling on making a good final draft a lot faster. Like, those sorts of use cases are very good. What I think is really dangerous is when people start to, and I see people in conversation as they think of use cases do this all the time, take the next logical step and say, the AI will make the decision. Referring back to like a famous, possibly apocryphal slide from an IBM presentation in 1977, a computer must never make a management decision because a computer cannot be held accountable. That is very much true of artificial intelligence. And there are real risks, both just like unintentional, where people are like, let the AI make the call, and then like, you're going to have a bad time. Or I also think there are certain cases where people are trying to obfuscate decisions that are unpopular or may not be good by sort of rubbing AI on it and said like, well, the machine told us to, we had to do it, right? So like using AI to help with ideation is great. But I would be very, very cautious anytime it starts to feel like people are bringing AI in to like tell you what to do or to make a decision.
that reminds me of people saying, oh, we can't make any changes to the website because it's going to mess up the accessibility, and that just being used as a, a firm no to any unpopular choice.
Oh yeah, hand out the microphone, even better.
Hi, I'd like to come back on the whole idea of the monolith versus like an ecosystem like Drupal. My personal experience I found when trying to sell Drupal to organizations is that we need to have clients who are very technically, I'd say, mature and willing to work with the developers in order to make decisions make technical decisions versus clients who are open to, let's say, sleek presentations for monoliths tend to be maybe expecting that whatever product they buy is just going to do everything for them. And to me personally, I found that bringing clients from that point where they want us to do everything to a point where they're really involved has been the hardest thing about selling Drupal. I wanted to get maybe your opinion on that.
Yeah, I hear you, and that's not an unknown pattern. I think it's a little that the solution to that challenge is like a little bit of both, right? I think there's a world where we can continually work on educating clients on how it is that these decisions will affect their ability to achieve their goals. I also think it's incumbent upon all of us to speak more of their language at the beginning, because the truth is there is like a pejorative way of saying these flashy folks came in with a slick presentation and then they took everybody out to an expensive dinner and they won the deal, right? And there's another way of thinking about that from the client side, which is some really professional, well-dressed people came in, spoke my language, talked about my problems, and convinced me that they actually have an answer, and then we celebrated that with a nice bottle of wine. And so I think that there's it gets back to that finding the middle road between, overselling a complete solution that maybe isn't as integrated as presented and results in some disappointment after the fact. And on the flip side, presenting something that's hard for the client to understand and adds to their cognitive load, which is probably already over 100%, by making them make a bunch of decisions they don't feel that they have the expertise to make, right? That there's a middle ground where you can figure out how to decomplexify things to a certain extent, but not over-promise and then under-deliver, So I think it's a little bit about, again, finding that middle path. Yes?
I already have the microphone, so you can't not call on me. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, and I'm very stimulated and excited and have so many opinions. So I have a joke question, an honest opinion, and then an honest question. So the joke question is, how is blockchain revolutionizing WebOps? We'll leave it there, but for all you AI people, just keep that in mind 2 years from now. They might be laughing at you too. Second, I think it's important that you struck this balanced note between decoupled and architecture and the monolithic approach, and you've subtly pointed out that pejorative things like salespeople have another way of looking at it. So I think it's important for me as somebody who's been in the Drupal community for 17 years to weigh in to say, Drupal has been a monolith, a flexible, open-ended monolith that you can integrate with anything you want, but it has solved a lot of the problems in-house, and that's been a key to its success. And I think it's very important for us to remember that we cannot just downplay that as its value proposition to a lot of people, and let's make sure that we stay true to those roots as well. And I think it's important to realize that there's thought leadership involved in being a monolith, because you're telling this community, saying, I have an answer for this, I have an answer for this, I have an answer for this, and you're not alone. Everyone who's in Drupal is using this CRM or this mail solution or this thing or this hosting platform, speaking of monoliths, that works really well with it. So I just want people to not use monolith as a dirty word. Second, and my second question is, I really respect that Pantheon has always straddled several communities, including WordPress and Drupal. And And so on the subject of Starshot, I know you guys, you Josh, have been to many WordCamps over the years, and what are your thoughts on what is the most important aspect of Starshot, and what is Drupal missing that will make it stay as relevant as it is? And is Starshot checking that off, or is a part of it more important?
I'm thinking on that for a second. That's a good question. I think the most important aspect, in my opinion, which is not deeply informed because I haven't been in the guts of the project at all. I've been just outside observing it. The most important part of that Starshot initiative is the idea of really trying to prioritize the content editor and administrative experience. We talked about this a little bit in the earlier presentation. Luke was saying, crafting down like the roles and permissions so that people don't have access to things that they don't need and they shouldn't have. The reality today is it's probably way too hard to do that work, even from a roles and permissions standpoint. Like if you take a modestly ambitious Drupal build and you open up the admin permissions screen, the number of checkboxes on that screen is bananas. The odds that people are going to get the choices of what checkboxes to check and not correct is almost zero. And so what most people do in that context is they give content editors administrative access to everything because that ensures that they're not blocked in doing their job. The downside of that choice, which is it's a pragmatic one, but the downside is they now have access to tons of things that they don't need and or could even be dangerous for them to use. And what happens then is they have a user experience that's cluttered with a bunch of stuff, and they know if they click the wrong thing, they might break the website. And what they do then is they start filing JIRA tickets to post content. Fixing that will unlock a whole bunch of utility and growth within the Drupal ecosystem. But that is a really hard problem to solve because it involves taking a more opinionated approach than we've historically done to how the content management process should work. And that's where, I think, this is not a new problem, right? And I think the normal process that the community has used to try to improve these things historically hasn't solved it, right? So I love that we're taking a new approach to this and saying, let's really put a focus group of people to go heads down and actually work on trying to get, again, it's going to be Drupal, so you can always start to unhook things and open it up and tweak it if you need. But if it came out of the box with a really thoughtful implementation of what the right role, the right experience, and the right UI for a content editor was, I think that could help all of us because it could make our projects get off the ground more quickly. It would make the people that we hand the websites over to use much happier, and that would, make people, that would put energy and drive into the Drupal project for sure.
Yeah, I love the idea of Drupal having some more opinions baked in out of the box because it makes it easier also to then watch a video about how to do this thing with your Drupal site, and hey, the permissions actually match the permissions of your brand new Drupal site. So having an opinionated configuration is going to be helpful, but then unlike all the other opinionated options out there, like a WordPress or like a Squarespace, to be able to remove the opinions and no, I have my own opinion, I'm going to change all of this. That's really the strength and the differentiator that I think Drupal maintains even with something like Starshot.
Yeah, and then since you mentioned WordPress, this is something that when I talk to Drupal people, it's an interesting compare and contrast. Right? So WordPress is open source. You can kind of do anything with WordPress too. But the mindset in that has always been, and you can see it in terms of even just how their community is composed. Like WordCamp, their big event, is 80% users of WordPress. Right? The user of the the CMS is deeply embedded in everything they do, and as a result, it's like a nicer out-of-the-box experience. And as a result, people who package up contributed stuff, they build fully complete solutions as a plugin. There's no like stacking plugins like Legos to create functionality in WordPress. And that is nice because it means that people can get something useful out of the box, and they can go to the plugin manager and find something in the browser and click and install it, and it probably does what it said it did completely end to end, and they can set it up and use it. It becomes challenging when you install 3 plugins that don't know about each other. Like there's downsides to this approach as well, where if you don't have any kind of unifying glue or like user experience meta layer or all the abstractions, that Drupal has too many abstractions, but WordPress maybe has too few. And so you end up with these websites that get built by people who are plugin wranglers, and it's like a terrible admin user experience because there's like 17 menus and they all use different terms and they take you to screens that are all laid out differently. And that's not good either. So it really does require sort of like, and I think the way that Drupal works and the types of projects we typically use it for and the types, it's just trended towards larger and more complex organizations where part of the work is figuring out this like tasteful approach. But if you don't have to figure it out from scratch, it's going to be way better.
Thanks so much, Josh. I think we're going to break for lunch. This gives us a lot to chat about.
Yeah.
Lots of like Drupal versus WordPress conversations and Lego metaphors that I would like to overhear in our lunchtime conversations. But thanks so much for joining us at Evolve Drupal, and I think this is a great way to end off the morning.
Thank you for having me.
Sorry for the false signal.
No, it's fine.